Welcome back to Vietnamese Vixens. Today's story hits different because it's not about some young guy chasing adventure or looking for himself in Southeast Asia. This is about Gary, a 62-year-old retiree from Malmö, Sweden, who spent 8 years building what he thought was his perfect retirement life in Thailand, only to watch it crumble around him. And now, he's part of a wave, a quiet exodus of older Western men packing up and leaving Thailand for Vietnam, convinced they found something better, something more real. But Gary learned the hard way that geography doesn't fix what's broken inside you, and paradise has a price tag no matter what country's name is on it. If you're watching from anywhere in the world where you felt that pull to start over somewhere new, drop a comment and let me know where you're from. And if you've ever believed a place could save you from yourself, hit that like button and subscribe, because Gary's story is going to feel painfully familiar. My name is Gary Anderson, and I'm 62 years old, sitting in a small cafe in Da Nang, Vietnam, watching the sun burn orange over the South China Sea, and I keep thinking about how I got here. Not just to Vietnam, but to this exact moment in my life where everything I thought I knew turned out to be a comfortable lie. I'd been telling myself for years. I moved to Thailand in 2016, left Sweden after 35 years of manufacturing work, a marriage that had been dead for the last decade of it, 2 kids who were grown and barely called, and a pension that seemed generous in Swedish kronor, but felt like freedom when I saw what it could buy in Southeast Asia. I'd visited Pattaya once on holiday in 2015, and something clicked. The warmth, not just the weather, but the way people smiled. The way a beer cost less than a bottle of water back home. The way I could rent a decent apartment for what I paid monthly for, car insurance in Malmö. I wasn't running from anything, I told myself. I was running towards something better. Those first few years in Pattaya were exactly what I'd dreamed about during those gray Swedish winters. I had a small condo 3 blocks from the beach, 9th floor, balcony where I'd drink my morning coffee and watch the city wake up. I bought a used Honda PCX scooter, and I'd ride up and down Beach Road feeling like I'd figured out some secret the rest of the world was too afraid to chase. My pension went so far, I felt rich for the first time in my life. Dinner for 80 baht, good Thai food, not tourist garbage, beer for 50 baht at the right bars. I made friends, other expats, guys from England and Australia and Germany, all of us living this easy life of pool tournaments and dart leagues and lazy afternoons watching football at bars, with names like Champagne and Dollhouse. I knew what Pattaya was. I'm not naive. I knew the bars, the girls, the whole industry that kept the city running. But I stayed away from that scene, mostly .500, go to the regular bars, the ones where Thai families ate dinner, where the staff knew my name because I came every week, not because I was paying for their attention. I dated a bit, nothing serious. A Thai woman named Noi for about 6 months, but she had her own money, her own life. It ended naturally when she moved to Bangkok for work, no drama. I convinced myself I'd found balance, that I was one of the good ones, the expats who actually respected Thailand instead of just using it. But things started changing around 2018, 2019. Slowly at first, then faster than I could adjust to. The prices crept up. My rent went from 8,000 baht to 10,000, then 12,000. Street food that cost 40 baht was suddenly 60, then 80. Beer prices jumped. The Chinese tourists arrived in waves, massive tour groups that clogged Walking Street and the beaches, changed the whole energy of the city. Russian families buying up condos, driving prices even higher. The bars I loved started closing, replaced by louder clubs, bigger operations that catered to the package holiday crowds. My quiet Pattaya was disappearing under layers of development and tourism I didn't recognize. The visa situation got worse too. In the beginning, I did border runs every few months, easy trip to Cambodia or Laos, stamp in the passport, back to Thailand. But immigration started cracking down, officers asking more questions, wanting to see bank statements, proof of funds, treating guys like me with suspicion, like we were criminals, instead of retirees spending money in their economy. I hired an agent eventually, paid her 15,000 baht every few months to handle the paperwork, grease whatever wheels needed greasing. It worked, but it felt dirty. It felt like I was bribing my way into staying in a country that used to welcome me. Then COVID hit and everything stopped. I flew back to Sweden in March 2020, thinking I'd be gone a month, maybe 2. It turned into nearly 2 years, living with my daughter and her family outside Gothenburg, feeling like a guest in a country that was supposed to be mine, watching the Swedish winter drag on forever, checking Thai visa news every day like an addict. When Thailand finally reopened to tourists in late 2021, the rules were insane. Insurance requirements, Thailand pass applications, quarantine hotels. I waited until mid-2022, until things normalized a bit, and flew back to Pattaya expecting to slide back into my old life. It wasn't there anymore. My condo building had new management, new rules, rent was now 15,000 baht. My favorite restaurants had closed. The bars I knew were half empty or completely changed ownership. The expats I'd been friends with had scattered, some died during COVID, some went back home, some moved to other countries. And the prices, Jesus, the prices. Everything had jumped 30–40%. My pension hadn't changed. I was suddenly doing math every day, watching my bank account closer than I had in years, cutting back on things I used to take for granted. The immigration office became a nightmare. New forms, new requirements, agents charging more because demand was high and supply was limited. I paid 25,000 baht for my annual extension in 2022, twice what it cost before. The officer looked at me like I was trash when I couldn't answer why I didn't have 800,000 baht in a Thai bank account. I wanted to tell him I'd been living here for years, spending money, supporting local businesses, being a good guest in his country. But I just smiled and nodded and let my agent handle it, feeling smaller every minute. That's when I started hearing the whispers. At a bar one night, talking to Colin, an English guy in his late 50s who'd been in Pattaya longer than me. He was saying he was done, moving to Vietnam, Da Nang specifically. Said it was like Thailand used to be, before it got too expensive, too crowded, too hostile to regular retirees. I laughed it off. Vietnam? I never even considered it. I barely knew anything about the country except the war and pho. But Colin kept talking. Rent for $300. Food for pennies. Friendly people. Easy visa process. A coastline that made Thailand look overdeveloped. I started noticing more guys talking about it. At the gym, at breakfast spots, online in the expat forums. Vietnam was becoming the answer, the escape from the escape. Guys were comparing notes on cities. Da Nang versus Hanoi versus Ho Chi Minh City. Arguing about which had the best balance of affordability and infrastructure and available women. Because, let's be honest, that was always part of the calculation for some of these men. I told myself I was different. I wasn't running to Vietnam for girls. I was just tired of Thailand pricing me out. Tired of feeling unwanted. Tired of watching my retirement fund shrink while everything around me got more expensive and more complicated. The breaking point came in March 2023. I went to renew my visa, same agent as always. She called me 2 days later, voice tight, said there was a problem. Immigration wanted proof of my pension source, wanted bank statements from Sweden, wanted documentation. I didn't have readily available because who keeps that stuff when you've been doing this for years? She said she could fix it, but it would cost 35,000 baht, almost $1,000. I felt my chest get tight. I asked her why so much, what changed. She just said, things are different now, more difficult, more people watching, take it or leave it. I paid it, I had to. But sitting in that immigration office waiting for my passport, watching them process me like cattle, I felt something break inside. This wasn't my home. This was never my home. I was tolerated as long as I paid the right fees to the right people. And the second I couldn't, I'd be gone. Thailand didn't want Gary Anderson, 62-year-old retiree from Sweden with a modest pension and basic needs. Thailand wanted rich Chinese investors and luxury tourists and digital nomads with infinite money. That night, I researched Vietnam for real. Read everything I could find. Watched YouTube videos from expats who'd made the move. The visa situation looked easier. Renewable 3-month tourist visas with minimal hassle, or a 1-year temporary residence card if you bought an agent dinner and $200. The cost of living looked almost too good to be true. Like the numbers had to be wrong. A modern apartment in Da Nang for $350 a month. Coffee for 50 cents. A full meal for $2. I kept waiting for the catch, but the videos and blogs all confirmed it. Vietnam was affordable in a way Thailand used to be, but wasn't anymore. I made the decision over a bottle of Mekong whiskey in my overpriced Pattaya condo, staring at my budget spreadsheet, realizing I could either stay here and slowly go broke, cutting back every month until I was living in a shoebox eating 7-Eleven sandwiches, or I could take a chance on somewhere new. I'd already run once, from Sweden to Thailand. What was one more move? At least this time I knew what I was doing. I wasn't some naive kid. I was a man with experience, with eyes wide open, with realistic expectations. I booked a one-way flight to Da Nang for April 15, 2023. Gave notice on my condo. sold my scooter and most of my furniture, packed 2 large suitcases with clothes and a few things that mattered, said goodbye to the handful of people I still knew in Pattaya, promised to stay in touch knowing I probably wouldn't. Colin had already been in Da Nang for 3 months, and he sent me tips, apartment recommendations, the name of a good visa agent. The flight was short, barely over an hour. I remember looking out the window as we descended into Da Nang, seeing the coastline, the mountains, the river cutting through the city, and feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, maybe. Or just the familiar rush of starting over. The drug of believing that this time, this place, this version of the adventure would finally be the one that worked. I stepped off that plane into Da Nang International Airport, and the first thing that hit me was how clean everything looked. Modern. The airport was smaller than Bangkok's chaos, but it felt organized, efficient, like someone actually cared about first impressions. Immigration took 15 minutes. The officer looked at my passport, asked how long I was staying, stamped me in for 3 months without a single question about my bank account or my intentions. No suspicion in his eyes. Just routine. I walked out into the arrivals hall feeling lighter than I had in months. Colin picked me up in a Grab, Vietnam's version of Uber, and the drive into the city felt like traveling back in time to 2008 Thailand. The roads were busy but not gridlocked. Motorbikes everywhere, families of 4 stacked on a single Honda, but it felt energetic rather than desperate. The buildings were a mix of modern high-rises and smaller traditional Vietnamese houses, narrow and tall, painted in pastels. We drove along the coast and I saw the beach, wide and clean, not packed with tourists, just some local families and a few Westerners scattered here and there. Colin was grinning the whole time, saying, I told you this was different. He'd arranged viewings at 3 apartments for me that afternoon. The first one was in Thuong, a neighborhood near my K Beach, and I knew immediately it was right. 8th floor, 2-bedroom, modern kitchen, balcony facing the ocean. The landlady was a Vietnamese woman in her 50s named Mrs. Hoa, and she spoke decent English, showed me everything with pride. The bathroom had a real shower with hot water, not the sad trickle I'd dealt with in my last Pattaya place. Air conditioning in both bedrooms. Fast internet. She quoted me 9 million dong per month, and I had to do the math in my head, converting, realizing that was $380 for this. With an ocean view. In Pattaya, this apartment would have been 25,000 baht minimum, probably more. I signed the lease that day, paid 3 months up front, the standard deposit plus first month, and Mrs. Hoa gave me the keys with a smile that seemed genuinely warm, not the transactional politeness I'd gotten used to in Thailand. She said if I needed anything, call her. Her son could help with motorbike rental, with setting up utilities, whatever I needed. I believed her. Those first few weeks in Da Nang felt like falling in love. I'd wake up early, around 6, and walk down to the beach before the heat got serious. The sunrise over the South China Sea was different every morning. Purples and oranges and reds that looked photoshopped, but were just nature showing off. I'd stop at a small cafe near my building, a place with plastic stools and no English menu, and order coffee by pointing. Vietnamese coffee, strong and sweet, served over ice. Cost 15,000 dong, about 60 cents. The woman running the place started recognizing me by day 3, would have my coffee ready when she saw me coming, would try out her few English words while I butchered Vietnamese back at her. The food was incredible and almost insultingly cheap. I'd eat banh mi for breakfast sometimes, fresh baguettes stuffed with pork and vegetables and cilantro, 20,000 dong from a street cart. Lunch would be bun cha or pho at local places where I was often the only foreigner, big bowls of noodles and meat and herbs for 40,000 or 50,000 dong, less than $2. Dinner. I'd experiment, try different places, and even at the nicer restaurants catering to tourists. I rarely spent more than $10 including beer. I bought a used Honda Wave from Mrs. Hoa's son for 3 million dong, about $120, and suddenly I had freedom again. I'd ride up to the Hai Van Pass, the mountain road between Da Nang and Hue, and feel like I was in a movie. Sweeping curves, ocean on one side, jungle on the other, barely any traffic. I'd ride to Hoi An, the old town 30 minutes south, and wander the lantern-lit streets feeling like I'd discovered something special, even though thousands of tourists did the same thing every day. But it was the people that got to me. The Vietnamese seemed different from Thais, in a way I couldn't quite articulate at first. They were curious about foreigners, but not jaded. When I'd stop for water or directions, people would try to help even with the language barrier, would pull out their phones and use Google Translate, would sometimes just walk me where I needed to go. Shopkeepers didn't overcharge me the way they did in touristy parts of Thailand. If I got scammed, it was small, negligible, the kind of thing you laugh about later. Mostly people seem to charge fair prices and appreciate the business. I started settling into a routine. Coffee at my regular spot in the morning. Ride around the city or to the beach, lunch at rotating local places. Afternoons I'd read or watch football, or just sit on my balcony feeling grateful that my pension stretched so far here. Evenings I'd explore, find new restaurants, sometimes meet up with Colin and a few other expats he'd introduced me to. We weren't a big group, maybe 6 or 7 guys, mixed ages, mixed backgrounds, but all of us refugees from somewhere else, Thailand mostly, a few from the Philippines. The expat scene in Da Nang was nothing like Pattaya, no girly bars, no walking street full of neon and desperation. There were a few foreigner-friendly bars and clubs, but they felt normal, like places where actual people socialized rather than transacted. I liked that. It felt healthier somehow, even though I knew Vietnam had its own version of the industry, just less visible, less centralized. About 3 weeks in, I found a cafe that became my second regular spot. It was called Dreamer Coffee, right near Thuong Beach, modern setup with good Wi-Fi and comfortable chairs. The kind of place where digital nomads would camp out all day with their laptops. But in the mornings, it was quiet, just a few locals and the occasional early rising tourist. The coffee was excellent, real espresso drinks, and they had Western breakfast options if I wanted a break from Vietnamese food. That's where I met Lynn. It was a Tuesday morning, late May, and the place was nearly empty. I was sitting at my usual table near the window, reading a book on my Kindle, drinking a cappuccino. She came in wearing hotel staff uniform, some resort logo on her shirt, and ordered a takeaway coffee in Vietnamese. Then she noticed me and switched to English with the barista, practicing, and I heard her struggle a bit with the words. When she turned around waiting for her drink, we made eye contact and she smiled. I smiled back. That's all it was supposed to be. But then she said, "Excuse me, are you from America?" with this hopeful tone like she was excited to practice English with a native speaker. I told her Sweden, and she looked disappointed for half a second, then curious. She said she'd never met anyone from Sweden before, asked if I lived here or was just visiting. I said I'd just moved here a few weeks ago. She said welcome to Da Nang, and then her coffee was ready and she left. I saw her again 2 days later, same time, same cafe. This time she asked if she could sit with me for a few minutes, practice her English before work. Said she was taking classes at night, trying to improve because better English meant better job opportunities, maybe management position at the hotel. I said of course, happy to help. We talked for maybe 20 minutes. Her name was Lynn, she was 34, born in Da Nang, had worked at the Fusion Resort for 3 years. She asked about Sweden, about why I moved to Vietnam, and I gave her the sanitized version. Retired early, wanted somewhere warm and affordable, loved the culture. She seemed genuinely interested, not performing interest the way I'd learned to recognize in Thailand. It became a thing. 3-4 times a week she'd come in. We'd talk for 15 or 20 minutes before she had to go to work. She'd ask me questions about English grammar, about idioms, about how to say things more naturally. I'd ask her about Vietnamese culture, about her family, about Da Nang. She told me her parents lived in the countryside outside the city, that she sent them money every month, that she had a younger brother in university in Hanoi. She was proud of him, wanted him to have opportunities she didn't get. After a few weeks of this, she started staying longer. We'd talk for an hour sometimes, and she'd be late to work, laughing about it, saying her manager liked her so it was okay. The conversation shifted from language practice to actual getting to know you stuff. She told me about a bad breakup 2 years ago, a Vietnamese guy who cheated on her with a girl from Hanoi. I told her about my divorce, about how my marriage had been over long before it officially ended. She asked if I had kids, and I showed her pictures of my daughter and son, both in their 30s now. She said I looked too young to have kids that old, and I knew it was flattery, but it felt good anyway. She started introducing me to her friends. One weekend, she invited me to a beach barbecue, just Vietnamese people in their 20s and 30s, and I was the only foreigner there. They were welcoming, curious, asked me a million questions about Europe and why I chose Vietnam. We grilled fish and drank Vietnamese beer, and someone brought a guitar, and they sang songs I didn't know, but clapped along too anyway. Lynn stayed close to me the whole time, translating, making sure I felt included. On the ride home that night, on my motorbike with her on the back holding onto my waist, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Connection, maybe, or the possibility of it. We started spending more time together outside the cafe. She'd finish work and message me, ask if I wanted to get dinner. We'd go to local places she knew, away from the tourist spots, and she'd order for both of us, teach me the names of dishes, laugh at my pronunciation. She insisted on splitting the bill every time. I'd try to pay, and she'd actually get upset, say she wasn't that kind of girl, she had her own money. It made me respect her, made me believe this was different. One night in early July, we rode up to the High Van Pass at sunset, something she said she hadn't done in years, even though she'd lived here her whole life. We sat on the wall at the top, looking down at the city lights starting to glow, at the ocean turning dark, and she told me she was happy I'd moved to Da Nang. Said most foreigners she met were just passing through, tourists. But I felt like someone who actually wanted to understand Vietnam, who respected it. I told her she was the main reason I was happy here, that she'd made me feel welcome in a way I didn't expect. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat like that for a while, not talking, and I knew I was in trouble. The good kind of trouble, I thought. The kind where you meet someone unexpected and they change everything. We didn't rush into anything physical. It was almost old-fashioned the way we dated. Dinners and coffee and long rides on the motorbike and conversations that lasted until midnight. When we finally kissed, it was after about 6 weeks of spending almost every day together, standing outside her apartment building, and it felt earned, real, not transactional. Colin warned me, of course. We were having beers one night, and I mentioned Lynn, how great things were going, and he got that look on his face. That older expat who's seen everything look. He said, "Just be careful, man. Vietnamese girls are smart. They play a long game." I got defensive. Told him Lynn wasn't like that. She had her own job, her own life. She paid for herself. He just nodded and said, okay. I hope you're right." I was sure I was right. Lynn was different. This was different. Vietnam was different. I learned my lessons in Thailand. I wasn't some naive kid who could be manipulated. I was a grown man with experience and boundaries and the ability to see through bullshit. That's what I told myself anyway, in those golden summer months when everything felt perfect and possible and real. When Lynn would stay over on weekends and we'd wake up in my apartment with the ocean breeze coming through the balcony and drink coffee together and make plans to visit Hoa An or Hue or the countryside. When her friends accepted me and her family, who I hadn't met yet but heard about, constantly seemed okay with her dating a foreigner. I thought I'd finally found it. The life I'd been chasing since I left Sweden. The balance of affordability and connection and purpose. A woman who wanted me, not for what I could provide. A country that felt like home instead of just a cheaper alternative. I should have known better. I should have listened to Colin. I should have recognized the patterns I'd seen 100 times in Thailand, playing out in Vietnamese instead of Thai. But I didn't want to see it. I wanted to believe that this time, this place, this woman, this version of my retirement dream was going to be the real thing. And by the time I saw the truth, I'd already given away more than I could afford to lose. The shift started so subtly, I didn't notice it at first. It was early September, about 4 months into whatever Lynn and I were building together, and we were having coffee at our usual spot when she got quiet. Not her normal quiet, the comfortable silence we'd settled into, but something heavier. I asked what was wrong, and she hesitated, looked down at her cup, then said her mother had been in the hospital. "Nothing serious," she added quickly, "just some tests, some medication needed, but the costs were adding up and her family didn't have insurance that covered everything." I asked how much, and she said no, she wasn't telling me to ask for help, she just needed to talk to someone about it. She was stressed. But I could see it in her eyes, the worry, the weight of it. I told her I wanted to help, that I cared about her and her family, even though I hadn't met them yet. She refused at first, said she couldn't accept money from me, that it wasn't right. We went back and forth, and finally I said, "Look, it's not a loan, it's not charity, it's just what people do when they care about each other. Let me help." She cried a little, hugged me, said she'd pay me back as soon as she could. I sent her 3 million dong, about $120. It didn't feel like much. My pension was $2,200 a month, and I was spending maybe $900, living comfortably in Da Nang. I had room to be generous. I wanted to be generous. I wanted to be the kind of man who took care of the people he loved. Her mother recovered, and Lynn was so grateful, brought me a homemade meal her mother had cooked as a thank you, said her whole family was talking about the kind foreigner who'd helped them. It felt good. It felt like I was building something real, being welcomed into a Vietnamese family, becoming part of something bigger than just my own comfortable exile. 3 weeks later, her motorbike broke down. She showed me pictures, the Honda Wave with a cracked engine case, said the mechanic quoted 2.5 million dong to fix it. She needed the bike for work, couldn't afford Grab every day, didn't know what to do. This time, she didn't even hint at asking for help, just told me about the problem like she'd tell anyone. But I offered immediately. Told her not to worry about it, I'd cover it. She could pay me back whenever, or not at all, whatever worked. She was reluctant again, but accepted, and when her bike was fixed, she took me for a long ride up the coast to thank me. Packed a picnic. Made the whole day special. We ended up at a quiet beach north of the city, and she told me she was falling in love with me. Said she'd never felt this way about anyone, that I made her feel safe and seen and valued. I told her I loved her too. And I meant it. I did love her, or at least I loved the version of myself I got to be with her. The generous, capable man who could solve problems and provide stability and be someone's hero. October came, and she mentioned her younger brother, Min, the one studying in Hanoi. His tuition payment was coming up, 15 million dong for the semester, and her parents were struggling to put it together. She said it with resignation, like she might have to ask him to take a semester off, work, save money, come back to university later. I couldn't let that happen. Education was important. This kid had a chance to build a real future, and what was $600 to me? Less than 1 month's pension. I told Lynn I'd cover it. This time she really protested. Said it was too much, that I'd already helped so much, that her family would feel indebted. I said families help each other, and if we were serious about this relationship, then her family was my family too. She cried again, told me I was the most generous man she'd ever met, that her brother would be so grateful, that her parents wanted to meet me now, wanted to thank me properly. The meeting happened 2 weeks later. We drove out to her village, about an hour into the countryside, and her parents' house was small and simple, concrete and tile roof, chickens in the yard. Her mother and father were in their 60s, weathered and kind-looking, and they greeted me with warmth that felt genuine. We sat on plastic stools in their living room and communicated through Lynn translating. And they kept thanking me for helping their daughter, for being good to her, for supporting Min's education. Her mother gave me fruit and homemade rice wine, and her father shook my hand with both of his, looking me in the eyes like he was entrusting me with something precious. I felt accepted. I felt like I'd crossed some threshold from foreigner to family. On the drive back to Da Nang, Lynn held on to me tight on the motorbike and said her parents loved me, that her father had told her I was a good man, that she should take care of me. November brought a new request, though this one wasn't framed as a request at all. Lynn mentioned her cousin had an opportunity to open a small cafe in Hoi An, a tourist area that was always busy, guaranteed customers. The cousin had most of the money saved but needed a foreign investor to partner, someone who could help with the last bit of capital and also attract Western customers with their presence. The profit split would be 40% for the investor, 60% for the cousin who'd run the daily operations. Lynn showed me a business plan her cousin had put together, pages of Vietnamese text with some English translations, photos of the location, projected earnings. I looked at the numbers and they seemed reasonable, maybe even conservative. The investment needed was 200 million dong, about $8,000. The projected monthly profit was 30 million dong after expenses, so my share would be 12 million, almost $500 a month. Within 2 years, I'd make back my investment, and then it would just be passive income. And it was a cafe, something I understood, something legitimate. Colin's warnings echoed in my head, but I pushed them aside. This wasn't some bar scam or land deal. This was a real business opportunity with family involved, with Lynn's reputation on the line. I told her I was interested, that I wanted to meet the cousin first, see the location, make sure everything was legitimate. We drove to Hoi An on a Saturday and met Tommy, Lynn's cousin, a guy in his late 20s with good English and an energetic pitch. He walked me through the space, a small storefront on a side street near the ancient town, already set up with some equipment, just needed renovation and full build-out. He showed me the lease agreement, the permits he'd secured, introduced me to the landlord. Everything looked real. He said he'd already invested 150 million dong of his own money, just needed the final 200 million to finish and open. Once we opened, he projected 6 months to profitability, then steady growth. I asked questions, tried to do due diligence, but the truth is, I didn't know Vietnamese business regulations, didn't understand the local market beyond my own experience as a customer. And I trusted Lynn. She vouched for Tommy, said he'd run successful businesses before, that her family trusted him completely. I wanted to believe that my connection to Lynn gave me insider access to real opportunities that other foreigners didn't get. I transferred the money in 3 installments over 2 weeks, 200 million dong total. Tommy gave me a handwritten receipt and a partnership agreement in Vietnamese that Lin translated, said it was standard, legally binding. My 40% was protected. We celebrated that night, the three of us. Dinner and drinks in Hoi An, talking about grand opening plans, about how I'd be part of a successful local business, how this was just the beginning. For about 3 weeks, I felt like an investor, a man building real stakes in Vietnam beyond just living cheap. Tommy would send updates, photos of renovation progress, receipts for equipment purchases. Lynn would talk excitedly about the opening, about how proud she was that I was supporting her family's entrepreneurial dreams. Then the updates slowed down. Tommy stopped responding to messages as quickly. When I'd ask about timeline, he'd say delays with permits, problems with contractors, normal business issues. Lynn would reassure me, say Tommy was just busy, that everything was fine. By mid-December, I hadn't heard from Tommy in over a week. I told Lynn I wanted to drive to Hoi An and check on things myself. She said she'd come with me, but when we got there, the storefront was dark and empty, not under renovation, just empty. The equipment that had been there was gone. The landlord, when we found him, said the lease had been terminated a month ago, that Tommy had stopped paying rent. I felt my stomach drop. Lynn looked genuinely shocked, pulled out her phone and called Tommy immediately, yelling at him in Vietnamese when he answered. I could only understand her tone, the anger and confusion. When she hung up, she was shaking. She said Tommy claimed there'd been problems, that he'd had to pull out of the deal, that he was going to return my money but needed time. She said she couldn't believe he'd do this, that she'd trusted him, that her family would be humiliated. I asked for Tommy's address and she said she didn't know exactly where he lived, somewhere in Da Nang, but she'd only met him at family gatherings. I asked about the partnership agreement and she pulled it out, suddenly unsure, said maybe we should have had a lawyer review it, that she'd trusted him because he was family. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried everything to get my money back, called Tommy repeatedly, got excuses and promises, and then eventually no answers at all. Lynn tried reaching out through family connections, but Tommy had apparently gone quiet with everyone, wasn't showing up to family events. I looked into legal options, but every expat I talked to said good luck. Foreign investors have almost no protection in Vietnam without proper corporate structure and documented contracts, and my handwritten receipt in Vietnamese wasn't going to hold up anywhere. The money was gone. $8,000. Just gone. I tried not to blame Lynn. She seemed as devastated as I was, cried about how ashamed she felt, how she'd vouched for Tommy and let me down. But something had shifted in me. I started looking at everything differently, with suspicion I should have had from the beginning. I started adding up what I'd given her over the months. The hospital bills, the motorbike, the tuition, plus smaller things I hadn't kept track of. Dinners I'd paid for despite her protests. Gifts. A new phone when hers broke. Probably another $6,000 or $7,000 on top of the cafe investment. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The designer bag she carried sometimes, the one she said a friend had given her. The new iPhone 14 that replaced her broken phone, way nicer than what my tuition money should have bought. The nights she said she was with family, but her Facebook check-ins showed her at bars and clubs in Hoi An and Da Nang with people I didn't recognize. I started watching her social media more carefully, scrolling back through posts I'd never paid attention to. Photos from months before I met her wearing expensive clothes at nice restaurants. A comment thread in Vietnamese that Google Translate turned into something about another foreigner, and laughing emojis. Tagged photos with a young Vietnamese guy. Lots of them, recent ones. Them looking comfortable together in ways that suggested more than friendship. I didn't want to be that guy. The paranoid, jealous foreigner stalking his girlfriend's social media looking for evidence of betrayal. But I couldn't stop. The doubts had started, and they grew like mold in the back of my brain. Every time she was late to meet me, I wondered where she'd really been. Every time she checked her phone and smiled at a message, I wondered who it was from. In early January, she started being less available. Work was busy, she'd say. Family obligations. She needed some space to deal with the stress of the Tommy situation. Our coffee meetings became less frequent. The overnight stays stopped. When we did see each other, she seemed distracted, distant, like her mind was somewhere else. I confronted her on a Tuesday afternoon at Dreamer Coffee, our original spot, and I asked her directly if she was seeing someone else. She looked genuinely hurt, said, how could I ask that after everything we'd been through together? How could I not trust her? I apologized, said I was just stressed about the money, about feeling like I'd been stupid. She softened, held my hand across the table, said we'd get through this together, that she loved me. But the next day, I saw her. I wasn't following her. I swear I wasn't. I was just riding through in Thuong on my way home from the beach, and I saw her motorbike parked outside a coffee shop. And through the window, I saw her sitting with a young Vietnamese guy, mid-20s maybe, and they were sitting close, the way she used to sit with me, and he had his hand on her leg and she was laughing. I sat there on my Honda across the street for probably 10 minutes, just watching, feeling something die inside my chest. Then I drove home, and I went through her Facebook again, found the guy, his name was Win something, and scrolled through his photos, and there they were together. Multiple posts from the last few months, them at the beach, at restaurants, at parties. Some of the dates overlapped with nights she'd told me she was with family. I took screenshots of everything. I don't know why. Evidence, maybe. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that my suspicions were real. When she came over that Friday, I showed her the photos. I didn't yell. I didn't even get emotional. I just pulled them up on my laptop and asked her to explain. She looked at them, looked at me, and the mask dropped. The sweet, grateful, loving Lynn disappeared, and someone harder took her place. She said his name was Quan, and yes, they'd been seeing each other for a while, even before she met me. She said she did care about me, that our time together had meant something, but I had to understand how things worked. She was 34. She needed to think about her future. And Quan was young and Vietnamese and had a family with money and could give her the kind of life she wanted long term. But I was kind and generous and she liked me. And why did it have to be one or the other? I asked about the money, about the hospital bills and the tuition and the cafe, if any of it was real. She looked away, said her mother had been sick. That part was true, but maybe not as expensive as she'd said. Her brother was in university, but her parents had paid the tuition. They just needed help with other things. And Tommy, well, Tommy had seemed like a real opportunity at the time. She believed in it too. But yes, maybe she should have done more research before connecting us. I asked if she'd set me up, if this was all a scam from the beginning. She got angry then, said no. I was the one who'd offered to help. She'd never asked directly. I volunteered because I wanted to feel like a big man taking care of a poor Vietnamese girl. She said foreign men come to Vietnam for young women. Everyone knows this. And young women need to survive, need to plan for their futures. And if men want to give money to feel important, that's their choice. She said I'd known what this was, deep down, and I'd chosen to believe it was something else because it made me feel good. She said she wasn't a bad person. She'd given me what I wanted, companionship and affection and the feeling of being needed. And I'd given her what she needed, financial help and security and a backup plan. That was the arrangement, even if I'd convinced myself it was love. I told her to leave. She gathered her things, stopped at the door, and said she was sorry it ended like this, that she had cared about me in her own way. Then she was gone. I sat on my balcony that night drinking Johnny Walker I'd bought for some celebration that never happened, watching the ocean turn black, and I felt hollowed out, not even angry, just empty. I'd done it again. Different country, different language, different story, same ending. I was the fool who thought he was different, thought he'd learned, thought this time would be real. Over the following weeks, I'd see other Western men around Da Nang, new arrivals, guys in their 50s and 60s with that hopeful look I recognized, because I'd worn it myself less than a year ago. They'd be at cafes with young Vietnamese women, looking proud and happy and convinced they'd found something genuine. I'd want to walk over and warn them, tell them my story, shake them, and say, wake up, see the pattern, protect yourself. But I never did, because I knew they wouldn't listen. I hadn't listened to Colin. You can't tell someone they're being played when they don't want to hear it, when the fantasy feels better than the truth. I'm still in Da Nang. My lease runs through June, and honestly, even with everything that happened, it's still cheaper than Thailand. Still cheaper than going back to Sweden. The city itself hasn't changed. It's still beautiful, still affordable, still full of kind people living their normal lives. The problem was never Vietnam. The problem was me, bringing my loneliness and my need to feel wanted and my pension fund to a place where young women have learned that foreign men will pay for the illusion of being loved. I see Lynn sometimes, around the neighborhood. We don't acknowledge each other. I saw her with Quan once, on his motorbike, and they looked happy. Maybe they are. Maybe she does love him. Maybe I was just the financing that helped her get there. I've started hanging out more with the expat crowd, the cynical older guys who drink too much and tell the same stories about being scammed or betrayed or used. I used to think they were bitter, that they brought it on themselves by treating Vietnam like a shopping mall for women. Now I'm one of them, nursing a beer at a foreigner bar, watching new arrivals with their local girlfriends, seeing my own history play out in their faces. Colin was right. Vietnam isn't better than Thailand. It's just earlier in the same cycle. Give it 5 more years of foreign retirees flooding in with pensions and savings, and it'll be exactly like Pattaya, same dynamics with different accents. The pattern follows you. The loneliness follows you. And if you're looking for love to validate your escape, to make you feel like you made the right choice, leaving everything behind, someone will always be willing to sell you that fantasy. In Thailand, in Vietnam, anywhere in the world where economic disparity meets romantic desperation, I wake up every morning now in my apartment with the ocean view, drink my cheap Vietnamese coffee, and wonder what I'm still running from. Because I'm 62 years old, and I've run from Sweden to Thailand to Vietnam, and I'm no happier, no more connected, no more at peace than I was in that dead marriage in Malmö. The only difference is the weather's better and my money goes further. But you can't buy your way out of yourself, no matter how favorable the exchange rate is.